Hey everyone, this is Thibaut again, back for episode number 3 already, and I'm super happy to have Luis with me today, who is currently in cold Valencia, if you trust us, apparently in Spain. And I think, yeah, I'm super interested to hear Luis' story because he's coming from Honduras. He actually worked in the BPO space. We have a bit of a similar experience also. You started as an agent, grew through the ranks, became team manager and all kind of thing. But I think you shared that you have some interesting stories, perspective on cultural layers, how it looks like to work in those kind of environments, stay motivated in BPO and all kind of things. So super looking forward to it. Maybe just to start, quick intro. Who are you, and how did you start in customer support? I think that's a good starting point.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Thib, for having me. And well, yeah, I'm Luis. I am from Honduras, born and raised. I am currently a student at Université de Montpellier. I am doing my master's degree in international business engineering, which is, I think, just a very fancy way of saying business. Uh, but in a previous life, I worked in customer support. I worked in BPO in Honduras for a little over 5 years. And like you said, I started off, very, very small, very just like, at agent level, as kind of basic as it gets, and slowly but surely made my way through the ranks. I'd say I'd split up my time working in support as, kind of half of the time being an individual contributor and half of the rest of the half working as a manager.
Mhm.
So it's kind of interesting to just have like both perspectives and it's in those 5 years there were lots of learnings, lots of experiences and just things to share. So I'm excited to have an interesting conversation around that.
And how did that happen? Because like usually it's not super common to be doing still ticket when you're a manager. Technically, is it because like so I guess we can share you're working at PartnerHero because anyway it's answered in your LinkedIn. Was it because the company was still developing early? How did it come that it was like this, or was it the way that PartnerHero was working usually? Or
Yeah, I think something about Partner Hero, even when you're a manager, you're encouraged to really understand kind of how the front lines work. So even when I moved up as a manager, I was still very interested in understanding how agents operated on their day to day. I think that's crucial, when you're leading a team to actually, understand like the customer experience, but also the agent experience, and then from that kind of make decisions. So that also could just be my own motivation to try to like be very hands-on. I appreciate that from my leaders, and I appreciate that from myself as a leader myself. So that kind of just came up naturally, and for me, it's something that I think about, kind of my fellow managers, my mentors, and stuff like that, and they were very involved. Obviously, at some point, you can't do everything, right? But there's still an appetite and a desire to really understand the nits and grits. So sometimes I would find myself in the queue, answering tickets, taking calls every now and then. Uh, and from that, that allowed me to be a better mentor to my team, to be a better guidance and to really understand the experience. You know, it just makes for an easier flow of work, I'd say, between agent and manager. So yeah.
okay, so it sounds like you in the end like your the path from being only an agent to already starting being a manager went relatively quickly. I don't know exactly how many months that was. Um, but how did you feel about that? Like, because something, for example, in my if I take my own experience as an agent, it took me already only I would say 9 months to feel like fully confident in my job as an agent only, because it was complex. There was a lot of different products and those kind of things. So, how did you approach that? How did you feel linked to that?
Yeah, I think I was always just very motivated and interested in kind of the management role. So even as an agent, I kind of thought about like, what would happen if I kind of, asked for more insights, or what would happen if I took on, this additional responsibility or something along those lines. So there was a lot of just, kind of interest on my end, that really, beyond just, kind of like having an appetite to be a leader in the organization, it was also just like, I'm just trying to understand the works of this industry, and I'm
Mm.
trying to get better insights, and I'm trying to just expand my knowledge, right? And fortunate enough, I was presented with just amazing bosses and mentors and people that really supported and really saw, the potential, I guess. So, with the motivation and with, kind of the right timing and the right people around you, I was able to like really flourish and feel really, really comfortable, which I am so appreciative of because, in support, that isn't always the case,
Mhm.
especially working in, kind of a BPO based in Latin America. The industry can be quite cutthroat, can be, just a bit rough. So I just feel really grateful, and I think about those times, and I'm like, yeah, I kind of moved up quite quickly, and I think it was a combination of just my own motivation, but also having the right people around me, having the right mentors, having the right tools, and the right space to flourish. So that was great.
And how, I mean, that's great. And unfortunately, sometimes not super common, but how did that happen? Like, what did those mentors do, like, to give you those opportunity? How did it start? Like, was it like project? Was it a few missions on the side? Like, how,
Yeah,
how did it look like that they gave you this ownership
for sure.
early on?
Yeah, I think first it started with just like me building the courage to ask the question, and I think sometimes that's like that's the most difficult part. Sometimes you have the appetite to do something, but you feel shy, you feel not prepared, you're scared of, potentially making mistakes and stuff like that. And so on that end, I just had to build the courage to even say it to my managers, just be like, hey, this interests me. I would like to see more of this, or I would like to be exposed to more of this. And once that was voiced, my mentors were like, okay, well, is this what interests you? This is, if this is what you want, this is a side project that I can assign to you, or this is kind of an introduction that I can give you, or I can connect you with this other person. Right. It started very like kind of just like little things on my day to day that were, kind of fit into my agenda, into kind of like, a normal working week. And then slowly but surely, I was exposed to more information. And at some point, you end up owning the processes. Like if you're giving the confidence, you'll find yourself leading special projects that maybe weren't necessarily within the scope of your role to begin with, but at some point they just kind of became part of your role. And that's when you can like really start seeing growth. And that's how you kind of like make it into a lead role, into a manager role, so on and so forth. But to answer punctually your question, yes, it did start with just like kind of little things, like here's this maybe more complex ticket that I'd like to assign to you, or maybe here's this particular client that I want you to reach out to, and kind of communicate with them and help us solve this issue, et cetera, et cetera. So just little things slipped into my daily work that eventually led to kind of more growth and so on.
Okay, interesting. So I guess that's really specific to you. I mean, but you were mentioning also in the early on before the interview. I mean, like that you wanted to touch on motivation and so on. But I think for you, it was really about. It really feels like almost since the beginning you wanted to go this leadership slash management direction, and this is what led you to stay motivated. Because sometimes the work as an agent, I've never worked in a BPO environment. I've worked inside companies. I've been a team manager. I know that sometimes closing tickets can be grueling, but I guess that's what motivated you to keep going, basically, if I
For
understand
sure.
well.
Yeah, for sure. And I think to that point, right, and something back in the day that I found myself asking to my fellow colleagues and stuff like that is like, finding the motivation. And I can say it now because I'm kind of on the other end of it, but while you are trying to grow or trying to understand yourself within the field of support, it can be just, there are days where you have no motivation, or there are days when you truly don't know, kind of what you want out of this experience, out of this job. You know, Sometimes it's just, about doing the work, and that's kind of it. But other times you're able to like engage with, your mentors, your fellow colleagues and stuff like that. And that's when you start thinking about like, okay, what is actually pushing me forward? What do I want out of this experience? What do I want to learn? And like I said, it's really about the people that surround you and that give you the opportunities as well, and just being in an environment that allows you to flourish. So So yeah, I kind of reminisce on times like that and talking to my colleagues and all of that. And yeah,
Mm. Yeah, I think that's interesting. I hear that a lot, like the importance of having, I think the team around you, not only the management, but the people. I always said that. I think I said that to Andre also in the last episode, where basically I remember really fondly of my coworkers because we were helping each other much more than what I've seen in any other kind of settings, any kind of other uh, teams, I would say. Like even in sales, I've been in sales team also for a bit of time, and yeah, of course they are colleagues, but you don't have the same help coming from everyone around you. So that's also something that I remember. And sometimes people maybe think I'm crazy, but that's one of my one period of my career that I remember the most because of that, just because of that. But okay, interesting. And is there like, I don't know, maybe it's a story of a customer or a story with one of your colleagues in this case that basically really shaped your perspective of what it is to be an agent and what is customer support technically?
yeah,
Is there one thing that comes to mind that is, okay, I'm doing this because of that?
for sure. Yeah, I think I wouldn't be able to like pinpoint to one specific thing because to me like the thing that was most kind of jarring or most satisfying is more the appropriate word is just the human connection that you can create with the customer on the other end. And I think about all those just little moments where I'm like, taking a call from a customer, we're chatting about, whatever issue that we have to solve. And there's just like those little moments of spark of, I remember one of my mentors saying this of delighting the customer, and you can literally hear them in their voice where they just like kind of smile, they kind of just beam through the telephone line. And it's very specific things, it's very specific kind of details that maybe something you said, something that you retained, a particular way of like kind of phrasing something or just assistance. And I think of those kind of like human connection moments, and that's where I'm like, wow, that's what I really love about this industry, and this is what I appreciate the most out of support, being able to like help others, being able to connect with others in just beyond the surface. Because folks will often call us, kind of in support. They'll be the customer that's calling us. They want their issue resolved as quickly as possible, right? It can be very automatic. It can be very repetitive, and it's you're kind of just going through the motions, right? But then there's these moments of just like joy, of spark, and of just like true, just like kind of random happiness, I guess. And I think about those instances, and there's several, fortunate enough, that I've had. And to me, just it's just kind of crazy how you can build that through the phone, right? You don't even see these people. This isn't a
Mhm.
face-to-face conversation. It's something through the phone, sometimes even through text. But there's just like those little sparks that really kind of pushed me forward. And I've seen it with other folks as well. I've talked about this with other individuals, and they're like, yeah, that just little thing that makes your day, And when you have a lot of that, that's how I kind of just came to realize, this support thing really kind of works for me.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Mhm. Yeah, that's interesting. So from the agent perspective, what you were saying is basically making me think like that. Also, as a customer, when I have a great interaction like this with an agent, for me, it's also a spark. Like it basically boosts also my mood because then I'm happy and then I know, okay, I have my solution and so on. So it was just making me think of how do we replicate that in a world where you see people that will think that AI will replace human everywhere, and that's not. I think I'm vocal about it. That's not what I'm hoping we'll go for, but whatever. But this also makes me think about like to go to this place where you are able to create those moments where you provide the right experience, the right level of support, the emotion, the connection, those kind of thing. I mean, for me, it's also about training and being empowered to test things and so on. So, how did that go? Like in your experience, both as an agent and as manager, how important do you see it, and how did it look
yeah.
inside your experience?
Yeah. I think for sure the training is crucial to even be able to identify those moments, right? Because you kind of have to be prepared to, when the customer says something, you kind of have to be ready to capture that moment and to make that a magical experience. You can say, from an agent perspective and from a manager perspective, I'd say, what was really valuable to me is just the hands-on training. Like the hands-on, like it's good to have the theory. Obviously, you have to like understand whatever service or product that you're working on. You want to make sure that you come to any interaction prepared, with the right information, and that you kind of just understand everything as a whole. But then just like the actual doing, I think that's where you get the most value of things. So from an agent perspective, what I really appreciated was having like role plays or having just very interactive hands-on experiences to be able to kind of prepare me to take on a call, to take on a ticket, etc. And then from a manager perspective, it was really, really important for me to like provide that early on. I think about the trainings that I prepared for, kind of various programs, and I made sure to include a very practical, kind of portion, and I made sure that the training was as practical as possible, because as an agent, I know that that is what's most valued. I want to understand how to take this
Mm.
call. I want to know how to kind of work about the system, how to check the logs, how to like, kind of go about the motions, so that I am best prepared to handle that when an interaction that I think might be a bit confusing comes around, you know?
Okay.
And
Yeah.
I think that's, you know, getting your hands dirty is is crucial on both ends, manager and
Yeah.
agent.
Yeah. And yeah, that's why I think like my side, I've done like 1 month of training, but I think it was not effective because it took me then 9 months of being on the front lines, doing different kind of tickets to actually feel like, okay, now I can deal with anything technically. And that's why I think role play and simulation is what we should do more, but it's so time consuming. Taking it requires a lot of time from seniors, from leaders, from quality reviewers, to help. So that's also the problem
Yeah,
that we are trying to work on our side. But yeah, makes sense.
yeah,
Um, One thing you said a bit, just to speak about because I think BPOs and outsourcing is a really specific thing, I would say, where because you can work as an agent for a brand, but then when you work inside the outsourcing industry, it's also a bit different. And I think you said it can be a bit cutthroat in some cases. Can you elaborate a little bit, or maybe tell us one thing that you wish people would understand about what it is to work inside support in an outsourcing environment, basically?
yeah. It's, very good question, and I think I would tie this back to like, kind of the people that are around you, right? The colleagues, the leadership, sort of like the working culture that you have around you. Because unfortunately, what can happen in BPOs is that you are so tied to the number. You're so tied to the amount of tickets, you're so tied to the metrics, and it becomes really competitive and not in a healthy way. There's ways to like gamify support and to make it fun and to make it exciting and to kind of like have special rewards and treats and stuff like that. But keep it human. But there are situations for sure. It's a reality within the industry where it's just very competitive and it can be very negative and it can be about pitching people against each other. And that's when that's kind of like the you could say the ugly side of support. And what I feel fortunate enough that we want to kind of move away from by having these conversations and by just kind of sharing knowledge and stuff like that, because once you just kind of see each other as teammates, as kind of human, you're able to like kind of understand each other. It's really not about what you're doing individually, but it's about what you're doing together to kind of have a common goal and to kind of come together, I guess. So that's what I would mean by how it support can be cutthroat, and unfortunately kind of gives support a bad rep. But I think slowly but surely we're kind of shifting away from that method. Kind of understanding that it's really not about pitching or pitting us all against each other. It's about coming together, helping each other out. We're all here for a common goal, essentially. So yeah, more of that
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah, yeah. That's interesting. That's also a huge fan of staying a lot on the Reddit also to see what people working in outsourcing environment are saying, and it's always eye-opening in some cases, and definitely still work to do. But that's good to hear from someone that was inside. Um, One other thing that you mentioned was like, I mean, you're currently in Europe. You worked in Honduras before. I think you have seen multiple culture work differently, work together, and so on. So, is there one myth linked to that or to customer support that you want to break a bit, or how did you, or if I go back to culture, like how did you see the impact of those different culture impacting the way we do customer support, and did you see big differences, or
Yeah.
how do you approach that?
Yeah, that's very, very interesting. And I think naturally there are differences in approach. And I can talk to you from my experience. Obviously I'm born and raised in Honduras, but I kind of grew up in a space where I had a lot of I was in touch with American, like US culture a lot. And I think you can probably tell
Hmm.
by my accent where I like have a mostly American English accent. I I in support, whenever I was like kind of having interactions with, kind of customers or even partners, even clients, I was able to kind of just bring in that little sort of American, kind of sprinkle, even though it's a culture that's not really truly mine, but it's something that I kind of grew up around. And whenever I was able to kind of like show that, I could see that there was like a bit of a difference, a positive difference. I felt like a bit of a stronger connection, I could say.
Hmm.
So I think there's something about, if you understand the culture of the industry that you're working with, you're able to kind of just like shift, a little bit, like kind of sprinkle a little bit something. You're not going to have the same approach, talking to a person from Honduras than you would to a person that's from France, right? Just naturally. And I think that goes beyond just support. I think that's just in general kind of how we go about life. And I
Hmm.
guess my recommendation, as I have a particular interest in being in spaces where there's a mix of cultures. And I think my advice to anyone that kind of seeks out the same, especially in support, is just like, kind of inform yourself, ask questions, understand different cultures, understand different perspectives. And if you're able to, kind of bring that to your daily job and kind of just, not to say, kind of like shift your own culture completely or your own perspective, but if you just kind of sprinkle that little thing in, that will delight people. You will see that kind of like
Hmm.
spark and that joy if you maybe slip that quite like little phrase or maybe that fun fact that you know about a particular country or language or something like that. I saw definitely like the benefits out of that. And I would encourage anyone that is seeking to be kind of in this multicultural environment to do the same, you know?
Yeah, yeah, that's great. We also feel like you're you don't have any issue to motivate yourself. I think in those things. So, but I also think sometimes people need not a push, but to see the opportunities, and I think that's also where leaders and managers need to do more in some cases, and that's why I think also for me, what we do at SmartHole is not only about training and so on. My hidden agenda behind this is that I also see it as a way to help agents grow some skills, some skill set that maybe they didn't know they had that we could identify and basically help them become a product manager, finance person, like specializes them in some way and help them go out of customer support because I think we also have to accept the fact that for a lot of people, and I think actually it should be for everyone, that customer support is a phase and that you grow out of. You can at least the agent work. I mean, like it's not something that is sustainable long term, and you need to see a way, like a path out of it. At least that's my vision.
Yeah.
Um, okay, I think we are almost at time, so is there one thing you already shared things like that you would encourage people, but is there anything else that you want people to take out of this discussion, based on your experience, based on what you feel customer support is
Yeah.
and or could be in the future?
Yeah, for sure. I think about, there's this phrase that one of my mentors said, there was a time in my career where I kind of like felt that I needed to kind of overwork myself. not because anyone was asking me to do it, but because I just felt the need to kind of do as much work as possible to be good, to prove myself and stuff like that. And one of my mentors was really like, you need to stop doing that, and you need to like have your own structure and your own life and your own motivations, and kind of not tie yourself to work. Essentially, he was saying like, go touch grass. I really took that, and I really, understood what he meant by that. And I really appreciated that. And ever since that person told me that, applied it to essentially every facet of my life, and especially, kind of just my working life. And I've been able to share it with other individuals in support where they feel like they have to overwork themselves. They have to, take on the most amount of work and kind of do everything to be the best, to like, kind of aspire to a promotion, stuff like that. And I think if you are in an environment that truly cares for you, they won't, allow that. You will be able to have your own life, and you will be able to have your own motivations, and you can still, have aspirations to grow and support, and to, kind of grow in your work. But also you need to know your own boundaries and understand, when to disconnect and when to just enjoy life. And I really just, I think about, those words from my mentor, and just really absorbing them. And I've tried to kind of just preach that on to other folks, and I've seen how that's been helpful. And just when you reiterate that, people start to relax, and people start to just be better with their time management, with their work management and stuff like that. So if you're, kind of starting in support, or have an appetite for support, or are experiencing, kind of overworking yourself and stuff like that, just take a breather, and just, kind of learn how to disconnect. Find a hobby, find things that motivate you outside of work, and that will honestly make you better in your role. So yeah, that'd be my word of advice.
Wise words. Looking, maybe I'm gonna steal that a bit. Cool. Thanks. What is, just to close, what is the next step for you? So you were saying you're studying, like, where do we connect with you? What's the next step?
Yeah. Yeah, so I will continue to be a student for about a year and a half. And I'll be finishing my master's around like September 2026, if all goes well. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'll probably, kind of send you a link so that you can drop it on the chat, on the comments. And same with my kind of personal address and my academic address. And it's kind of funny how I'm kind of balancing, kind of being a student, but then also someone that worked in support and stuff like that. So if you want to have any chats about, being a student, working in support, or any combination of both, I'm more than happy to connect and help.
Cool. So you know where to reach out, guys. Thanks, Luis, for the time. Thanks for participating, and I hope we'll maybe connect later on after your studies. We'll see. Maybe we do a second round. We'll
Absolutely.
see. Kind of updated one. Thanks, everyone. I hope to see you for the next episode, and I'm sure we'll have other great stories to share. Thanks. Bye
Thank
bye.
you.